Hi, and welcome to the Visibility Gap. Today we're talking about family building and the critical role that workplace benefits can play in supporting people on this journey. Here's a fact that you might not know. According to Maven, 57% of employees say they would consider switching jobs for better fertility benefits. 57%. In this episode, you'll hear firsthand from someone who experienced this all and benefited not only from the support of friends and loved ones, but benefited also by being seen and supported through workplace benefits. Then we'll bring on a panel of experts to discuss the big picture and how businesses can help employees feel more seen. Our guest today is Kelly Donahue. Kelly is a realtor from Los Angeles. Kelly credits her partner's employer-sponsored health benefits as, quote, one of the only reasons why IVF was possible, end quote. Kelly is normally optimistic and stays healthy, but through the process, she started asking herself, is there something wrong with me? Kelly, welcome to the Visibility Gap. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
I can't wait to hear about your story because every person's journey to parenthood is unique and individual and specific to them. But I would love to hear your story and what led up to your decision to become a parent.
Sure. Well, I decided in 2020, my partner and I wanted to give it a shot at having children. And so we decided, well, the way to do this is through IVF. And we thought, okay, let's just get started. It's going to be a piece of cake. Go in, go have a baby, easy breezy, you know? And that was not the case. I went through 11 rounds of IVF. And 11 rounds of IVF and 2 IUIs.
When did it become obvious to you and your partner that your jobs covered IVF benefits?
Well, when we started trying in 2020, we knew that we had 3 cycles with insurance. So we thought, okay, we've got 3 shots here. Let's give it the college try and get it done. And 3 shots was not enough. 3 rounds of IVF. That's 3 egg retrievals. That's 3, going under anesthesia 3 times, which I went under 11 times. So I kept on going down the road where we would, my partner actually got a better job offer, and so we switched jobs. And then there was a whole new round of IVF available to us through that insurance. She didn't switch the job just for IVF or for anything of that matter, but it afforded me the opportunity to have another 3 shots through the insurance company to do IVF.
And when you were going through, let's say, the first round and then the second round, did you feel increasing stress and pressure that, you knew that it's 3 of 3, now I'm 0 for 2, everything is riding on this last cycle? And what was that pressure and stress like?
The first time I did IVF, I told my mom and all my sisters and my aunt, all right, I'm going to be pregnant, blah, 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 here it goes. And then when you have to be the one to say, oh, by the way, it didn't work. And then the emotions of that, like having to deal with that, to tell other people that it didn't work rather than just you and your partner knowing, being in a private situation, was so much worse. So then after that first round of IVF, I didn't tell people that I was going through IVF. And yes, it was very taxing. And, come the 3rd round, it's this or nothing. Or you pay out of pocket, which is very costly.
You say that you started to be more secretive about it, which is totally understandable.
Yeah.
With that must have come a little bit of loneliness, right? I mean, you're trying to keep a number of balls in the air at the same time, juggling work and all of your professional responsibilities with all of this physical and psychological, process. Did you feel at that point, that loneliness added to the stress?
I think the only loneliness I felt was the sadness that I couldn't share it because I didn't want to, in case there was, it's not successful, that I would have to let everyone down again. It's quite the roller coaster. But I have a very wonderful partner, so she was going through that with me and supporting me emotionally because the physical things you have to go through, which, the injections in your stomach, they hurt and they leave scar tissue. So it's kind of a permanent thing. And also the hormones that you have to take, it really does affect you. You gain weight, you get tired.
I'm interested to hear your experience because I think a lot of people, hear or think assisted reproductive technology, family building, IVF, and they think it's like going in for a haircut. So what were you hit on some of the physical kind of consequences or experiences that you had, but talk us through both the psychological, emotional, and physical experience that just one round of IVF was like, let alone 9.
Sure.
Plus.
11 plus
right.
2. Yeah, it was incredibly crazy. But for the first round of IVF, I noticed, you really do gain 10 to 15 pounds when you're going through these hormones because you're introducing things into your body that would not normally be there in abundance. And instead of just having one follicle, become enlarged and drop, you are creating as many follicles as you have, and they're becoming enlarged. And so you feel bloated all the time. You feel exhausted. You also feel very emotional as far as like things could trip you up very easily or make you extremely sad or extremely happy or, the things that you would normally be regulated on are not regulated. Shorter fuse. You hit it. Yes.
Yeah. And your baby was born via a surrogate.
Yes, she
What
was
was that experience like?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. We really didn't know the road we were going down. You really don't know anything when you're going into IVF. You expect something and then it's something else. But working with a surrogate was such a wonderful thing. We lived in the same city. We got to go to all the ultrasounds. We went to the hospital. We had our own room. She was right next door to us. And, it was a wonderful birth. We were there when the baby was born. And just the emotional impact of what this woman did for us, I will forever be grateful to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can hear the emotion in your voice.
Yeah.
What would you say now that you've been through this process several years, you have a healthy baby, what helped you and what didn't help you socially and functionally throughout this process? Because it can be very isolating for anyone, male or female, going through this process. But particularly, I think for women, it can be very hard.
Yes.
It can seem like, well, what do you mean? This should be the most natural thing ever. Why is it so difficult? What's wrong with me? Mm-hmm. What helped you get through those kind of moments?
Taking time for myself, going for massages, meditation, walks.
Love meditation.
Yes. Talking about it with my partner, being kind to myself, and letting myself know that, you know what, this is not a rare thing. So many people go through these journeys, whether you're a man and a woman, 2 women, 2 men, whoever it is, whatever you're going through, you just need to be kind to yourself.
So now that I'm putting you on the spot and making you kind of the voice of family building for this one moment, hypothetically, if you could close your eyes, institute a new either policy or system or just vibe, ethos around family building, and start with the advice you would give to the inner circle of the person going through it, whether that's caregiver, immediate support system, what would your advice be?
I wish I would have known that it might not be that easy. And you have to have patience. You really, really have to have patience. And I'll tell you this, when I went through my first round of IVF and it failed, I cried tears. And you just have to tell yourself, listen, what will be will be. I will be just fine no matter the outcome. And you have to have that healthy mentality. And you have to keep on telling yourself that. Because I'll tell you this, it will slip in where you have the dark days where you're like, oh my gosh, there must be something really wrong with me. And there might not be something wrong with you. It might just, who knows, could be something else.
That blame is so insidious, but it really can creep in.
Totally.
What about, can I ask you, Kelly, did you and your partner at any time consider other non-biologic paths to parenthood?
Yes, we are very open to adoption. There are many different types of adoption. There's embryo adoption. The people who have gone through IVF, couples or single people who have extra embryos and they don't want to discard them, but they want to just donate them to a family to adopt. There's that option, which we're open to. We're open to adopting someone who is maybe not a baby, maybe someone who is a little older. The main thing is we just want to grow love. And so there are many avenues for that.
Do you remember, I want to call it the finish line moment, even though it's really just the starting line, the second you held your baby in your arms for the first time?
Yes.
What was that like?
I was the first one to have skin to skin with her. And as soon as she came out of the womb. And I just remember thinking, I cannot believe this is real. Is this really real after what my partner and I both have gone through for the last 4 years of our lives? Is this really happening? And it was, and it did, and it is, and it's really wonderful.
Well, I am certain that there are so many people who feel seen, feel more visible, feel more validated after hearing your story. I just cannot thank you enough for being here, Kelly.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We have an amazing panel of experts joining us today. Dr. Margaret Rutherford is a clinical psychologist with over 30 years of experience specializing in treating individuals and couples for depression, anxiety, and relationship issues. She is the author of Perfectly Hidden Depression: How to Break Free from That Perfectionism That Masks Your Depression. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you.
And Dr. Alana Biggers is an internal medicine physician and public health researcher dedicated to advancing health equity and improving chronic disease outcomes. She is an associate professor at the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Chicago and specializes in general internal medicine for adults, preventive health, chronic disease management, and women's health. Welcome, Alana.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you both so much for being here. So you both heard Kelly's story.
Yes.
What jumped out at you?
What jumped out to me was, her not knowing what it was going to take to actually get into this process. Wow. I was like, okay, one, I'm sure she went in there not knowing that she was going to do this 11 times, but actually everything that went along with it, the emotional toil that it took, the weight gain that she had, not being able to get pregnant each time. And
the pain, the physical pain.
Exactly. So, yeah.
I've been through IVF, so I remember feeling exactly like she did. And in some ways, I think it's somewhat self-protective to not necessarily know all the gory details of what's going to happen because you might chicken out.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting to me, too.
I love getting into the mental health aspect of any physical process or journey or issue or disease. I feel like in medicine, unfortunately, mostly Western medicine, we tend to disconnect the physical from the mental, right? I'm sure you agree with that, Alana. But I want to ask you, Margaret, more about you said it's almost protective to kind of go into it not knowing.
It is. I mean, I remember there was a lot of research out at that time. This was my son was born in 1994. So this was at a time when there was burgeoning research about the effects of going on all these drugs. And if you did not get pregnant at that time, the results weren't good as far as raising your chances of cancer and that, which you can, I'm sure, speak too much more eloquently than me. But I wanted to do this, and I was willing to take that risk, and so that motivated me more than fear. It had its own version of fear to be expressed, but it was something I was, as we'd say in Arkansas, bound, bent, and determined to do.
Oh, I love that. Bound, bent, and determined. But do you feel that when we talk about the ability to reproduce, fertility whether you're looking at the paradigm of fertility or infertility, that it's a particularly charged topic psychologically as well as physically.
Yeah.
It's almost like we assume, right? Both men and women just assume that it can happen.
I'd taken birth control for years, and I was the one with the infertile issues, not my husband. And so, I felt my body had betrayed me. I was less of a woman because I seemed to struggle in this way. And it was my self-worth took a big hit, and I had to grieve a lot about that.
Yeah. I mean, I had a similar experience as well. I'm an older mom, geriatric mom, as they would say.
Horrible term. I hate that term.
I hate that term as well. But I ended up having a miscarriage the first time that I got pregnant. And then it just sent me in a whirlwind. It was like, oh my gosh. And I had to go, I went and got all the testing done. And actually, everything turned out okay. And we ended up getting pregnant normally without having to go through the IVF process. But I remember feeling that way, like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Or maybe I waited too long because, my career, and just having that guilt attached to it.
So guilt segues a lot of times into stigma. And I know a lot of your career, Alana, is about dealing with inequities in our healthcare system. But let's just start on a micro level, individual guilt and stigma for fertility, right? For having a miscarriage, for not being able to conceive, for needing or wanting IVF. How quickly does that go down a rabbit hole?
Very quickly. Yeah. I know personally, for me, again, the guilt of, oh my gosh, why did I wait so long? Why did I put my career, ahead of family planning? But whereas, it was something that I don't have any regrets being a doctor. I love being a doctor. I love what I'm doing. But when it came down to family planning, I, doubted myself in that moment.
When you try to connect the dots between the mental and the physical, mental health, physical health, and well-being, and where that disconnect often is, you can see what's at stake when it's not there, when it goes wrong. You can see Kelly's case, she had so much support. She felt seen by her partner, by her family, by her loved ones. In the workplace, they had support. But when they don't, there are stakes, right, Alana? I mean, we see that. I always say you can't have a healthy body without a healthy mind, right, and vice versa. I think that it's oftentimes neglected, right? We get so focused on the physical being that we don't think about the social, the emotional, the psychological.
Yeah. I agree with you completely, and people lose sight of even the relationships that they're in as well. So I think that would be a good idea for people to have a pledge to each other and to actually really sit down and talk about what this could look like. And as you alluded to, thinking about how it would look like without a child if the process doesn't work out the way that they want to, and then hopefully getting to a place where they're okay with that.
Which is a task.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As I was listening to Kelly too, I kept thinking, and I experienced this myself because we tried for 3.5 years and then got IVF and were successful. I remember thinking, I need to grieve. I've lost, another cycle has come and gone. Another IUI was tried. Another drug was tried. And yet you think, but I can't grieve because maybe next month or next cycle it'll be different. So you're stuck in this spot emotionally where all aspects of grief are there: sadness, anger, fear, and yet you don't know if you really want to go there because it's next time it might all be just fine. And so it's this balancing of feeling forward thinking and saying, I've got to remain optimistic, I've got to remain positive, I want to do that, just like Kelly was talking about, and also balancing out or beginning to connect with, when it's appropriate, the harder emotions that you can feel.
Yeah. and giving yourself permission to have that full amplitude of highs and lows.
Exactly.
Even though it is probably a protective coping defense mechanism to say, I'm just going to keep it right here. How many times have we heard people or even ourselves said, I don't want to get too excited, but ... But Kelly said something else that I thought was interesting. I want to get your take on. She believes in meditation. She practices meditation, mindfulness. I'm a big believer in that myself. I know you are, Alana. How underutilized do you think mindfulness practices are? I know what you would say, Margaret.
Very.
But, I mean, right, in regular internal medicine, and preventive care, women's health.
Yeah. In general, definitely not utilized that much. And then even when we look at different segments of our population too, whether we're looking at people of color, is utilized even less. So yeah, I do research on mindfulness meditation. And I'll be honest with you, recruiting has been a challenge to get people enrolled in the studies. However, once I get people enrolled, they love it. Like my focus groups, they're like, oh my gosh, I wish I was doing this before. So it's a very underutilized, but it's very helpful once people finally get into that practice. And it doesn't have to be like 30 minutes, an hour. I think, that mental block actually stops people from engaging, but it can be just 5 minutes. It can be 2 minutes in the shower, anything. Yeah.
I mean, the costs, they're significant.
Yes. Yeah. They say, I think the average cost is anywhere between $12,000 to $20,000 per IVF cycle. And only insurance, about 43% of insurances in general pay for IVF. So many people are paying out of pocket.
So there's some of that, I'm sorry, some of that decision making is not something they do if they had a whole lot of money. I mean, they have to say, we've got to quit because of money. And so I do think that's a hard one. And yet there's so many people that are in that boat.
But financial economic costs, productivity costs, in and out of the workplace, ability to advance in one's career, do one's job, relocate if necessary. I mean, there are real financial and economic costs to this process. If it doesn't go smoothly, potentially, there are physical costs, obviously.
Right.
I was talking to Kelly, as you heard, about this myth that a lot of couples think it's like going into a nail salon. Oh, I'm going to do an IVF cycle. Yeah. Not that simple.
How many do you want to put back in?
That's
3
right.
or 5?
Not that simple. Yeah. So physical costs, logistical factors, social factors, some cases religious or ethnic or psychosocial factors. I mean, it is such a loaded issue that you can really say it's high stakes is an understatement.
Yeah.
It also, when it happens over a long period of time, just like any chronic problem, chronic pain, chronic anything, people begin to not know what to say. And they don't know whether to say, well, are you still trying? Or, how are you? And so the people that might normally be there for you because of the chronicity of it and their discomfort with that, people stay away from the idea that their own lives could get out of control.
Yeah, of course.
And so they don't particularly like it. And so again, we're sort of talking about the loneliness you talked with Kelly about. Yeah. But having that someone that does know, having that, it could be your partner, but it could also be, sometimes your partner is going through their own grief and their own feelings. And so sometimes having someone who, either a therapist, a friend, someone who can regularly talk to you about it.
So we all know in medicine and science and healthcare, you start with the observation first. So I think we've done a good job of that, kind of identifying a lot of the issues. Now to take it to the granular, actionable, someone's listening right now, they are an individual on a fertility journey. What should they know to have a better experience?
Well, I mean, I would say start early with your planning and your mind process or, getting your mind wrapped around the whole journey. Do your homework, do your research, what it entails, the cost that it entails. Also seeing whether or not your insurance company actually does pay for it. And if not, then having that planning ahead for the financial cost. Average, they say anywhere between 3 to 6 cycles
Right.
on average for
Right.
people to actually get pregnant. So, multiply that times 6 just to see whether or not you have to go through those costs and those expenses.
And I would say have this conversation, if possible, with your employer sooner rather than later, right? I mean, you might in your mind think this is way down the road, but there is no harm in starting to acquire information, find out what is possible through your employer, what's not possible,
Right. Great point.
start asking questions, normalize this whole process, would you say?
What I was going to say was that there was a book, and basically the author took people who wanted to be parents through a decision-making process about what was most important to them about being a parent. Was it the biological connection like you and Kelly were talking about? Was it I get to see them, walk down the aisle, or I get to put up with them when they're 12 and try to get through those years? Is it heritage? What is it about being, do you really need to feel pregnant? But, is that part of the desire? Because if you line those up and you both do that, both people in the couple, then you can begin to see how that's going to affect your decision-making process. And again, and then compromise or negotiate about those things, which, that can be an interesting discussion in and of itself.
And imagine, if you will, that you were single-handedly responsible for making one change in the workplace that could help a person or a couple going through a fertility process. Alana, what's your one change?
I would say support before even getting pregnant, whether or not it is to get someone prepared for having a family, whether or not it's, remote work or, just the flexibility of having that entity in your life where you can be in a space where you can have a family.
And I would just say, if it were up to me, talk, acknowledge, normalize, communicate. I know that our communication, this conversation, has definitely helped people today. Thank you so much for sharing your professional insights, both of you. This has been incredible.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
And thank you, our listeners. We hope that this episode of The Visibility Gap helps you and your loved ones feel seen. If you like what you heard, please share, like, and subscribe.